This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. And here we are, Timothy.
Oh, boy.
What the hell has changed? Anything? Fill me in.
Well, it's pretty much universally agreed upon that Biden's the winner, but with the exception of like four major Republicans, the Senate and the Republican GOP institution is not acknowledging this. And of course, behind the scenes, they all know Biden won, but this is all about the runoff in Georgia, because if they can, convince that the Trump base, the huge population, that they got screwed and cheated, then their gamble is that they're going to come out in herds as a revenge, because the GOP doesn't care about destabilizing this country. They care about keeping their power. So they think they're going to come out in herds and vote against it. The question is that going to work? Because now Trump is acting pretty chaotic. He's on a mass firing spree.
He needs to fire himself.
So he's doing that. Brennan is already talking about a soft coup, a palace coup, because the word is he's about to unleash all this classified information because he's throwing a temper tantrum. But again, so how's America going to interpret that? Is that going to hurt him? Lastly, the thing that really did hurt Trump was his mismanagement of COVID. And we're about to head into, because the runoff's going to be in January, we're about to head into a winter, they're claiming.
COVID hell.
It's going to be a disaster.
Well, so Tim, okay, Tim, calm down, because it's just more proof that you can't teach an old dope new tricks. 12 more adults in Trump's orbit caught COVID at their dunderheaded Election Day super spreader event. So I guess kill them all and let their false gods sort them out?
Well, so the Democrats have their own issues. There's already a lot of infighting, and I see it as gaslighting directed at the progressives, because there's a net loss of 5 seats. Basically, all the progressives that ran, including the first trans congressperson, the first felon, they all win. The fake Republican seats that lost, they're anti-Medicare for all. They're anti, basically the environment. And they're like, hey, we lost. It's the progressives' fault. It's like, wait, no, the progressives weren't running there. You were running.
Well, and look, excuse me, but now, as we were previously saying, winter COVID hell en route. The U.S. confirms 10 million in the U.S. alone coronavirus cases. And the daily infection, 60% over the last 2 weeks. Hospitalization, peak, 60,000. Average deaths, about 1,000 a day.
They think it's going to get up to 2,000.
Well, and you know who's suffering the most? I mean, everybody's suffering. This is infecting and affecting almost all communities, but the Navajo Nation is really suffering, because so many of the people there don't even have running water. And that's just, and also El Paso, Texas. And they're thinking that people in El Paso might be going over to Juarez to socialize or get groceries. I mean,
that is so insane. Let me finish this point, because I'm a little annoyed about this with this election.
A little.
Fucking, what was the tipping point for Biden here? Philadelphia, Atlanta, Madison. These are extremely progressive demographics that helped them. And then basically the turnaround is like, fuck you. You're the reason why we're losing. And basically, as Biden's already saying, I'm going to reach across the aisle, maybe I'll bring in like Kasich. By the way, Trump won in Ohio by fucking 7 points. Kasich did shit. What I'm mostly concerned about is it's starting to feel like Weimar Germany after World War I. Reparations really buckled them down hard, and then it led to austerity. And then, basically, if you don't give the people something like Medicare for all or any of that shit, and you're basically just allowing Wall Street, and by the way, Obama bailed out the banks. We're heading back into that same policy. If you don't give shit back to the fucking people, and you have 70 million fucking Trump supporters that feel like they just got burnt, and you give nothing to them, and you keep on squeezing them tighter, this is like Weimar Germany. I mean, get ready for fucking Trump 2.0 if you're really worried about this. It's a fucking disaster. It's kind of like, this is my analogy. You've been kidnapped by a cult on some island. That's Washington, D.C., the little cult. you're like, you know what? I got to get out of here. You start swimming. You're like, I'm free. And all of a sudden a shark comes over and starts mauling you. And that's Donald Trump. And all of a sudden a boat rows up. Like, I'm going to save you. And it's one of the cult members, Joe Biden. Come in here. It's like, well, wait a second here. Why the fuck was I in here to begin with? Why was I swimming here anyway? So,
But anyway, speaking of dumb fucks.
Okay.
I love this.
Please.
A press conference organized by that idiot, Rudy Giuliani, arranged at the Four Seasons. No, not the hotel, but stupidly at a landscaping business parking lot between a sex shop and a crematorium. Now, if that doesn't sum up Trumpism, to discuss his absolutely unfounded claims of voter fraud, and Giuliani's main witness, who claimed he saw examples of Philly voting fraud, a convicted child sex offender who was jailed in 1998 for exposing himself to two young girls.
Well, he was an old school flasher, but he's mentally ill is the point. And so that's where they're
the best they can come up with. Well, and by the way, did you see, the dumbest blonde he's ever had as his mouthpiece besides his daughter and his ex-wives?
Oh, yeah.
Who brings a 274-page of affidavits, and you could tell some were digitally altered, and they're just even more ridiculous. He has so far succeeded in not winning one fraudulent lawsuit he's thrown out there. Got to go. Fire yourself, you dumb fuck. We all hate you.
Well, speaking of morons, the McCloskeys, those gun family in the gated community in Missouri, who are basically, they might get thrown in jail. They're suing the guy who took the photograph now, and it's just getting so. Well, they were in the Republican convention. They're like, remember us? God. Morons galore out there. But
okay, all right. You want to speak about stupidity, and again, money does not equal class. A billionaire, appropriately named Bill Gross. I know that in itself is a bundle.
I know.
Who was accused in 2018 of spraying his $20 million home with fart. Let me say it again.
Oh, God.
Fart spray. After he was forced to hand over the keys to the property to his ex-wife in the divorce, is now threatening, and he has been, to keep playing the theme song from Gilligan's Island on loop to torment his neighbors unless they drop complaint about this $1 million really hideously ugly sculpture that it is in his backyard. And the neighbor and him, they're both so fucking dumb. They're just threatening to sue each other. But there.
Well, speaking of gross,
don't we always?
The soap operas, specifically Bold and the Beautiful, they're like, we have to be ethical. How are we going to do all these makeout scenes that we have to record?
Wait, Tim, back up a second.
Yes.
How the hell do you know about a soap opera?
Well, I do my research. You
do your research.
So if you a lot of people are in their houses now, and things are being locked down more. If you have daytime TV, maybe
anybody comes into my house, they're going to be locked down, probably under the bed.
Well,
just saying.
Cool. Well,
that is not an invitation, Tim.
Bold and the Beautiful, because they don't want to make their actors kiss each other because of COVID, they've been replacing different characters with mannequins. So basically, the actors are making out with mannequins right now. So
excuse me. Don't tell me you have never kissed somebody that felt like they were made of fucking wood. Why? And look. Well, excuse me. Why do they call them morning wood? I've kissed a few of those in my day.
Well, there's different theories about morning wood, and one of them is to not piss your fucking bed because the erection cuts off the bladder, and so guys are just drinking too much, and they're like, wait a second, why do I have this boner? I'm not even horny. It's like, well, you got to take a piss. Why,
and you know what? Let them go, because you don't want to suck the piss out of them.
Well, so
you might want to fuck the shit out of them, but you don't want to suck the piss out of them.
There's all types out there, Lydia. Let me tell you.
Oh,
all right, so
trust. We can talk about erectile whatever later.
Well, we can talk about that. We can also talk about sucking the piss, but we're going to move on. So
I don't mind a little tinkle on my toes now and then, I must admit, but you better be in the bathroom.
Well, I prefer twinkle toes over tinkle toes. But
you can shrimp my pinky anytime you want.
Okay. So a 51-year-old woman named Julie Loving decided to be the surrogate mother to her granddaughter. Her daughter was like, I can't get knocked up, Mom. And basically, and then they looked into surrogates. I guess the going rate for a typical surrogate is about $100,000. So the mom's like, well, why don't we use me? She's only 51. I think the son-in-law and mom are fucking. I think that's what was going on.
Once again, I mean, I don't care if the son or the son-in-law and the mother or the daughter are doing the dirty. Why don't they just go adopt a frickin' dog?
Well, that's becoming very popular. Today is Veterans Day, and they're celebrating Archibald McIndo, who is the godfather of plastic surgery. He, back in World War II, the Royal Air Force hired him because all these people their faces were half blown off, their burns, and he's like, I'm just going to make this up. He was like a genius, and all the people were like, just do anything. It's okay. He's like, I'm improvising it, and he is considered in plastic surgery. Well, of course, if you're really brilliant and it's a blank canvas and you have endless faces to work on, and you're smart, you come to conclusions pretty quickly. I think the foundation of a lot of these designs were invented by him. Of course, they've been refined a lot over the last, how long ago was that? 80 years?
Well,
Tim, I wouldn't want the early ones. That's all.
The beauty is neither you nor I will never need to go under that knife. Now, speaking of Veterans Day and back to the Navajo Nation,
Sure.
The Navajo Nation were the ones that invented codes that nobody broke in World War II. And I think they're all dead now, but they invented like a secret code that helped us to communicate with the Allies, never broken.
But wasn't that derived from like the smoke codes, and it goes way the fuck back, right? I've read that. I don't know if that's fantasy or not.
No, I'm sure it is. Well, a lot of people were threatening to leave America if Donnie Dumbfuck actually got away with rigging the election, right? Well, in my usual way of exaggeration, I was threatening to leave the goddamn planet because, I can't get far enough away from this shit. And I was really thrilled to see that NASA has revealed that the Milky Way holds, I don't know if it's enough for me, but at least 300 million, can't even wrap your head around it, habitable planets with liquid water on their surfaces that exist just outside our solar system. Now,
what's the closest one?
Only 20 light years away. I mean, is that all?
Right.
But okay, researchers arrived at the 300 million figure based on a conservative assumption that 7% of sun-like stars have a habitable world orbiting them. But however, the true figure could be as high as 300 billion. I mean, again, you are not even as large as a grain of fucking sand in the universe. We blow ourselves up to think we have actually some importance when really, in the scheme of things, it is so grotesquely and gorgeously unimaginable how vast everything is.
It's beyond
really
vast, and well, I don't know, because the global warming is getting insane. I don't think we're managing it so well. Irish surfers found a time capsule that's 2,000 miles away from where it was buried in the North Pole by Russians. I mean, just the whole fucking thing's melting. So they're like time capsules that were buried in the North Pole are like washing up in shores 2,000 miles away. And speaking of global warming, and this is very upsetting, great tits might be endangered and gone forever.
Excuse me?
Due to global warming.
Great tits? Great tits or great tits?
Great tits. I'm referring to the bird, of course, Lydia. Of course, your brain's going somewhere else. The great tit is a bird. And,
my great tits will never, they'll be with me for the rest of my life. Go ahead.
Well, great tits, they're saying are going to be gone because the things they eat, the larvae that they eat, are evolving faster with the global warming than they are, and it's somehow getting them out of phase. They can't eat them. But yeah, great tits might be gone forever due to global warming.
Well, and look, excuse me, what was there like already 27 tropical storms or hurricanes in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico?
Oh, yeah.
Highest ever recorded because the waters are so warm. And
there's another one coming.
It ain't over yet.
No, it's not over yet.
Well, it ain't over till we're all dead.
Anyhow, so do you want to announce? Do you have anything else you want to announce?
That's a great understatement. So, all right. Speaking of someone that just is more alive than ever, Absolutely fantastic. Fayette Hauser, part of the original troupe called the Cockettes out of San Francisco, a performance group of wildly radical, fashion forward, and I say this lovingly, weirdos that tramped around America doing insane performances. And Fayette has a new book out, and she's going as wild as ever. So I'd like to present for our 70th every week's an anniversary that we're still here episode on the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, Fayette Hauser. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Fayette of the Cockettes and various other outrageous acts against primitive society and their prudent ways. How are you?
I'm very well, considering all that's going on. I feel pretty great.
What have you been doing in your quarantine?
Well, I've been forced to do something that is actually kind of like grunt work. I'm shipping, packing, signing, shipping, packing books.
Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm sorry. Where's your intern? I almost said, where's your internals? But I know where those are.
Exactly. Where is my intern? Yeah. No, I'm much too. I give the devil its due with this COVID. It's much too much of a beast for me to have people over here. I mean, when Ron was over here the other day, we were out on the deck. We were outside. So no one is allowed in here because.
Are you going to the post office?
No, they have scheduled pickup. So I put it in the foyer of my apartment here. It's a fourplex, so nobody's going to steal it.
So you've been signing. Is this the book that Adam Parfrey put out? What book is this that you've been signing?
I'll show it to you. Yeah, my Cockettes book.
Okay, please do. Oh, it's gorgeous.
It's a 4-pounder. Thank you very much.
Would you settle for anything less?
No. Well, I had it up to almost 400 pages, but I had to cut 32 pages.
Okay, so is this like a pictorial history of the Cockettes?
Absolutely. It has pictures from the very beginning up until the film. That
came out not that long ago, the documentary.
2002, but it was
okay. In the course of our life,
18 years ago.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, but it's really popular, and it's had legs. It's had long legs, so it's still very current. And it was re-released this year in the UK.
Okay, that's what I was thinking about, the re-release.
Yeah, David Weissman and Bill Weber. David Weissman goes all over the place showing the film, so it's still hot on the track.
So this book looks gorgeous. I mean, even the cover looks fantastic. I can't wait to see that. So, I mean, let's go back to the beginning, because the Cockettes basically were a radical, outrageous, LSD inspired by also the films of Jack Smith and Living Theater performance troupe that all dressed outrageously. I don't even want to say the word drag, because it was more like avant-garde, and dressed that way everywhere, not just on stage.
Yes, absolutely. We were artists all living together in a house. I mean, people were living communally, but some were official communes. But we were not official in that way. We had no rules, regulations. People moved in and out.
Was in the Haight?
In the Haight. It was in the Haight area. The first one, we had 3 different houses. They were all in the Haight, actually, because that's where all the hippies lived. I mean, the Haight had been mom and pop neighborhoods, and they were filled with Victorians. So the hippies, it was a very, very efficient way to live, because the flats were cheap, because people didn't want to live in the city. They were all going to the suburbs.
How many at one time? So you've got this place in like 69 or maybe a little before. And how many were coming in and out at that time?
About 13 of us to begin with.
Was this one of those 3-story Victorians?
So it was 2 Victorians put together, but we were all in one flat. I think we were on the second floor. I mean, we had 3 different flats, but they were all Victorians. I mean, the last one we moved into had been the prior address of the big brother in the holding company. It was gorgeous, built-ins. It was a very beautiful on Oak Street.
Did you know Big Brother in the holding company, or did you just take over his flat?
No, I knew them personally because.
Would you go see Janis Joplin play?
I would see her play, and I would visit her too, because I was brought to the city by James Gurley's wife. So when I came to San Francisco, I got right into the nexus of the rock scene, and
right.
And did every drug available within the first week of being there.
Well, and how good were drugs at that point? I mean, how great was acid at that point?
Well, it was real acid. It was real acid.
The people who made the drugs were in the community, and it was not, no money was exchanged. I mean, the criteria was how great the high would be. If you were a chemist like Owsley, then what you wanted, the criterion was to make an incredible high. And he realized that you had to be in a certain state of mind yourself, because the acid would reflect your own state of mind. So that's why all the acid was all named differently, because once he would make it, then he would take it. It was almost like a mirror to his state of mind. And then he would name the drug, so.
Do you still do psychedelics?
I don't do that kind of thing on my own, because you're not really
Right.
supposed to. You're supposed to do it within a group in a great place. And I know a lot of people that are in my age group that still do it. And they at this point, my age group loves ayahuasca. That's
Sure.
one. And so it's a big ritual. You go somewhere and you have a collection of people and you do ayahuasca.
There's a new renaissance of psychedelics with the web, and there's all this new stuff. There's definitely a new wave. What I find interesting is these NYU medical studies with terminally ill people, and the positive aspects of psilocybin, and basically people just becoming at peace with their mortality. In short, basically what I'm getting at is it's not the late 60s wave, but there is kind of a new wave. And as you're actually even pointing out, your peers doing ayahuasca and doing those things.
No, I'm not at all surprised at that, because I feel as if that is the only possible future for us as a race, the human race and the planet, to progress, to evolve to a place of a new,
right,
a better consciousness, which is what we had in our community. We had an elevated consciousness, which was what created the ethos of the counterculture and the entire movement that we were in. And it was not capitalistic, which there has to be a level of enlightenment. So I think this is the first baby step, that they're doing it with people that are dying, and they're doing it with mental patients and other kinds of people. But my feeling is that eventually it will become the new ritual that will replace Catholic confirmation.
Sure.
Just like you would go to bar mitzvah lessons, well, you would go to, lessons about.
How young were you the first time you tripped?
I think I was 22.
Okay, I was 13, and I think that definitely doing psychedelics and expanding one's mind at that age just helped to expand everything. And I don't disagree with you that it could become the new religious, it could be a confirmation of childhood into adulthood if we can get back to the origins of what LSD really was.
When you see the cave paintings in LaSalle, and you see the Chauvet, the latest ones that they found, and you see the drawings on the wall, I mean, I think those were rituals that they were performing.
Right.
And drawing the horse, whoever drew the horse was obviously a very special person who could draw like that. That was channeling the energy and the fierceness of a horse. That was a ritual that they were performing in the caves.
Exactly. Expansionism, because, look, drugs came before alcohol. We know this.
Right.
Drugs go back to the cave. And it goes back to women understanding what herbs and drugs were. You know, I just go back to like the Minoan civilization, who for 3,000 years were doing pagan rituals with women only, with for the harvest, with all kinds of psychedelics, so that they could feast, fuck, and expand consciousness. And then when the Greeks took it up for 1,500 years, to me, the original Glastonbury or Reading Festival, that the Greeks actually under, you know, the Dionysian, like for 1,500 years, sworn to secrecy. People were invited into these rituals, mind altering, which as long as you haven't killed anybody and you could afford the price of admission, which was a pig or 1 month's rent. And all of the Greek philosophers attended this. Plato, Socrates, sworn under secrecy of death. What did they do there? And it wasn't until the Romans and Bacchus, alcohol, took it up, and they started doing it like an ecstasy rave every weekend, that it had to be shut down. But before that, these were pagan rituals instituted by women's knowledge of herbal drugs. And here we are.
The Egyptians were right in there too. And, you know, I felt as if when you look at the Egyptians and the paintings on the wall, actually in Egypt, you can see that they were really of a higher consciousness, and they had a big headspace. They were not
primitive. And also it's what shut down. It's why society was shut down, because they were gluttonous, as opposed to doing something ritualistically as a mind expanding way to get in touch with the muse, and therefore make your life feel as if it means something. Were you taking acid every day?
No, not me. Some people were, but not
Gotta
me.
recover. You gotta recover.
Well, yeah, because it was important to me. Some people did it just for fun, or they kept on doing it. Even Albert Hoffman said, you cannot expand past a certain time of your life of where your brain is at, you know. So, but there were other drugs too. You know, we would smoke a lot of weed, and there was mushrooms. And
how did 13 people come together in one location pre-Cockettes?
Yeah, I mean, the streets in San Francisco were gorgeous. Everyone was dressing outrageously. I mean, in the beginning, when I got there, it had a very organic nature, but it also had a very fantasy. People were very much into myth. When they were doing acid, you would become a goddess or a god.
Did you come from Colorado?
I did, yeah.
And there were a lot of people really there were already people in Colorado that were quite expansive, but a lot of those people did go to San Francisco.
Well, no, I was in Aspen for the summer. I had gone to Aspen in the summer to paint. You know, I had come out of art school, but Aspen was a hippie destination point because, you know, hippies were gypsies in panel trucks and vans and traveled all over. It was very much the nomadic thing.
So this is the backdrop. You know, you guys are expanding your minds. You're having all these new experiences, but you also are collectively creating and making.
And you came together on the streets because here you find your like-minded sisters and brothers, or non-denominationals.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everyone who was in the city, who stayed in the city, got in deep into that psychedelia, into the consciousness of the entire community. Some people came and didn't like it and they went home. You know, there was no middle ground. If you stayed, you were in deep. And everybody was creative and everybody was doing something. There were musicians walking up and down the street. James Gurley and Sam Andrew, they would walk up and down Haight Street playing. There were people that were making clothes. That's what was the beginning of the wearable art. So we were artists. I mean, Harlow was a performer. Nicky Nichols was a designer. And he would dress us up. He did our makeup. So when the three of us, Nicky, Harlow, and I, moved into Scrumbly's house at Bush and Baker. And so we were going out very outrageously dressed, even more so than the rest of the town. And so we attracted a lot of attention. And one of us, Gary Cherry, knew Hibiscus. And so one day Hibiscus came over with intention. He came over with
did Hibiscus come with Allen Ginsberg?
He came to town with Allen Ginsberg and Peter Orlowski, but not when he came to our house. I mean, he went to Cauliflower, which was a very specific commune, and Hibiscus fled, and he fled to us. So he because he was a theater guy, he said, theater is the blood in my veins. So he was in New York doing underground theater since he was a child. So he knew all John Vaccaro and Jack Smith. And so, I mean, on our side of the country, we were way into the living theater. And I was from the East Coast, from the New York area. So when I was a teenager, I was in New York looking for all those films, looking for those plays. So I knew what Hibiscus was talking about.
In New York at that time, there was outlandish theater and filmmaking, but there wasn't so much the costumes and the lifestyle that was similar to what was going on the West Coast. Like, it was a very different dynamic of what was happening.
Oh, exactly. No, the avant-garde in New York was very interesting, but it was in areas of New York. It wasn't a collective. It was not a collective scene like it was in San Francisco.
And it wasn't so flamboyant.
Absolutely.
What attracted you to the commune mentality? Was this anti-modernism of the heroic individual? Like why did you want to live in a commune?
It wasn't that kind of specific decision. I mean, that's really, everyone was living collectively because that was the cheapest way to live. And
right.
The Victorians were very well suited because they had very high ceilings. You could build lofts. Every time someone moved in, and it was casual, yet if someone came and people didn't like them, well, they just didn't stay. But if you came in, then Scrumbly would build a loft for you. When Nikki, Harlow, and myself moved in, Scrumbly got to work and built us lofts. And so there we were in the house. I mean, there was an acceptance. By the time I got there, it was 68. So, I mean, the scene had been creating since 65. So we're all in this house together. Link was there, Gary Cherry. There was a lot of the original Cockettes were already in the house. And we were going out every night as a group and attracting people of like mind. And so when Hibiscus came to us, there already was a group of people together.
And Hibiscus came from New York.
He came from New York, and he was George Harris III, and he came to New York. I mean, he came from New York. Allen Ginsberg, his mother, he came from the most fabulous family. They were very supportive. And when he came along in the family, they were a regular family, and he brought them all into theater. So truly, he was born in a trunk, as they say.
Born in a trunk, yeah.
His destiny was theater. And so he brought his whole family into doing theater. They did children's theater in Florida. And then Ellen Stewart brought them all to New York to work at La Mama. And she said to Allen Ginsberg, please show my son how to be gay. And she told Hibiscus that he was gay. I mean, really, that's how great the family was. So Allen Ginsberg brought Hibiscus to Irving Rosenthal, who had been a beat writer. And so he just knew him. And he kind of he was sort of like the gay guru, because he had a lot of gays into his commune, but it was far too restrictive.
I have to ask right now, what was your love life like at those times?
Are you kidding me? It was fabulous.
I bet it. I just had to squeeze my own nipples. I can't even imagine. It's been fantastic.
Gorgeous. Everybody was gorgeous. Everybody
was gorgeous. Everybody was engorged.
Everybody loved themselves and each other. It was a love fest.
All right. You got to tell me. I know it's hard to narrow it down, but you got to tell me one of the sexiest conquests and who delivered the best. Just give me 1 or 10 names. That's all I'm asking for.
Oh my God.
I know the list is long, but go ahead. Peel me a grape. Go ahead.
One of the most, I would say, outside and exciting and wild adventures was with R. Crumb.
R. Crumb.
Oh, no. Whoa.
If you could get past the Coke bottle glasses, I hear he's got a big one.
Well, that's according to Diane Hansen. He's very well endowed.
Do tell. Okay.
Me, he's fabulous. No,
and plus he likes weird women.
Oh, are you kidding? He told me I was his ideal woman.
Oh, honey.
And at the time, I thought,
It must have meant you got some good thighs and calves.
Exactly.
Well, it also means that he's such an imaginative mind that you actually tickled his brain, which is very flattering considering how incredible he is, for better or for worse.
I think our Crumb
brought him right into the Cockette house. So I mean, you know,
our Crumb as an artist we respect. Now we're respecting him as a lover. All right. Who would be next in line? Our Crumb. I have to say, you're a braver woman than I, but go ahead. That's why I say that's why they make pillowcases, but go ahead.
Well, Lydia's not into the nerd perverts as much.
Hey,
as
wait a second. I'm not into the nerd perverts. Who you talking?
Well,
Hey! Don't tell me what I'm into. Number 2 on the list. It's like spin the wheel of fate. I love it. Spin the wheel of Fayette.
Okay,
You're loving it, honey. You're blushing. Not really.
During the summer of 1970, this was right after the group started.
Yeah.
Nikki and I went to the country and lived for like a month or 2 on the Russian River. And we were invited to live there by my friend Stephen, who was a painter, and his wife was there as well. And we were in a cab. They had a regular house, and it was somehow there was a grove of cabins, redwood cabins, and so we were in the cabin.
Was this near Muir Woods? Where is this grove of cabins?
This is outside of Healdsburg on the Russian River. Okay.
All right.
So Nikki, he wasn't there, and neither was Margaret one night. And so he comes over, and he said, "My friend is coming over with some drugs. So let's the 3 of us do
Open wide for Chunky. Go ahead.
Never say no was my motto, you know.
Who brought the drugs and brought the goods?
Now,
Come on.
that drug turned out to be this like Ebo game that some African drug. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
I mean, that's no joke.
Ibogaine.
Yeah.
You fucking did that recreationally? I mean, that shit's no joke.
Ibogaine and ayahuasca are kind of on the same level.
No.
Hang on.
Ibogaine's next level. That's not true.
They're in a similar range of
different plants.
Hang on, Tim. Ibogaine, actually, they manufactured to actually cure addiction.
I know that.
Well, what are you interrupting me for? It re-ups a lot of things. But what is it as a high?
Well, I honestly got so high that specifics of the high elude me, except for when the 3 of us were having sex. That was
You had sex on Ibogaine. You had sex on Ibogaine.
Both of them at the same time. So
okay,
I could
fine. I mean, how much of a dose did you take? Usually it's such a disassociative.
But I could feel both of them inside me at the same time.
Now,
nice.
Was that a man and a woman or 2 men? You said both of them inside you at the same time. Well, honey, you know, that's why they make women as they do. We've got plenty of room for storage. Yeah.
All right. Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, because usually I begin such a disassociative, but you remember the 2 cocks inside of you was more powerful than Ibogaine. So wow. Well done. I mean,
well, and then we were on the river, so we were. You know,
hey, honey, sometimes you got to clean it out between, bouts. All I'm saying is it pays to be healthy.
All right. Well.
You are a saucy, sassy thing, and I have to say I love you.
Thank you. I'm telling you, it was the time.
So can I ask this? Because I was born in 1975. I hear about all these stories. I mean, I found my dad's original Zap comics when I was 9, kind of like traumatic but amazing.
Right.
At the same point, like kind of like whoa, the whole thing. But then I also, you know, when I started being a little aware, slightly at age 6 of some shit, I'm like, Reagan's coming in, and who got Reagan elected was basically the baby boomers, and so I'm wondering, where did it all go wrong? Like, it sounds so amazing, and where you've been, and of course you've still committed to your lifestyle. I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm just like, where did that shit fucking?
Let me make this simple. How did the '60s fucking fail?
The '60s did not fail. I've been asked that question.
How did they succeed?
That is the rap that came from the media. You know, when I was, even before I was in San Francisco, it was called the youth movement. And because we were the generation after the war, the post-war generation, and we were given so much freedom. Everybody loved the children, and we could travel all over the country. We were supposed to find ourselves. We were supposed to go to Europe and travel. Even after high school, you were supposed to do things to find out what the world was like. You were not encouraged to get a slave job like you are now. You were encouraged to become an individual and then do something. So everyone was very supportive of the movement. And then when the hippie movement, the counterculture, really got underway after the Trips Festival and the Human Being, it was all over the press. Life magazine, Irving Penn. This is the first time that I got turned on to the counterculture, was the shoot of Irving Penn that had the Grateful Dead family, the Big Brother family, all these people that looked so different. I mean, I was in New York, and this is in the mid 60s, and everybody was in Courage and go-go boots. And here we have these families that are dressed like some future past pioneers. And I thought, that is interesting to me. So all of this had great press. Everybody was loving it until it became clear that it was all socialistic. And then everybody was dirty hippies. Oh, you're going to have to give up everything to be a hippie. You don't want to do that. Then it started getting a bad rap because it was clearly socialistic. So it was Reagan and the capitalists that demonized it. However, all they really did was turn the attention away from us, which gave us more freedom within the counterculture.
But that's you, as opposed to the actual majority. Baby boomers were the biggest population at the time, so they actually were the people that got Reagan elected. Was basically the same generation got Reagan elected.
Well, here's the thing: not everybody.
Well, not you, but I'm saying, but so you actually believed in it, but it turns out the majority, based on just the way it voted, actually took on that those trends as literally a trend, because they changed the tides as fast as they embraced them, as far as I can see. I could be wrong. I mean, and I don't want to make it a huge generalization on any kind of generation.
Okay, hey, hang on a second. Anything positive, radical, adventurous, psychedelic, conscious raising is only going to have a certain amount of time in the public eye. It doesn't mean it's going to go away, but it's only going to be allowed a certain amount of fucking publicity.
Let me say one thing. The actual population of the counterculture was very small, because a lot
I believe that
came to San Francisco in the summer of love, went home because it scared them, and they didn't come from any kind of abuse, which many people, a lot of the people in the Cockettes and a lot of people were aliens in their family. They were aliens in their society. They were artists. They were different. And those are the people that stayed. They were, the counterculture had a very high IQ. It was people that were highly educated, and it was people that were completely disassociated from what was going on. However, that was not a large population. So the movement that was created was done by a small amount of people.
Yeah.
And here we are today still talking about it.
Yeah.
So I consider it a huge success.
I think it's a huge success too. I do. I
also talking about it, because some movements and some artists are 30, 40, or 50 years ahead of their time.
Absolutely.
And usually it's because the basis of their conscience goes back to that, even predates us as artists, because we are channeling. This is what psychedelic drugs help to do: channel back before. So much of what we are was polluted by what came after what our real consciousness is based on. And that's what actually LSD does, is allow us to hook into a universal consciousness and a universal reality, which predates time and predates our time.
I don't know if you've read the Gay Talese's Thy Neighbor's Wife, the history of American sexuality. And basically his theory about the summer of love is that during World War II, the wives that were basically in the United States had tons of male lovers on the side, even if and of course the United States had set up brothels, like American military strategy, brothels in the periphery of all these bases. And they all had, of course, World War II, they all had affairs, sex, and all that stuff. And so his theory is that the Summer of Love, their children, not just the baton of basically take it and run, the sexual revolution is basically like they set the stage for that to be allowed. His theory. It's not my theory.
Okay, Fayette, please.
That's an
jump
outside
in.
theory. That's
jump in.
Yeah, I mean, it's all possible, really. And because we're the biggest generation, so I would say, yeah, there was a lot of playing around. And abortion rights, that hadn't happened yet.
Yep. Huge.
So, and a lot of people were killed. A lot of men were killed. And so women were looking elsewhere. I mean, it was kind of the same, because our generation had the Vietnam War, and it took out so many men of my generation. And when the ones that came back were crazy. Yeah. So yeah, war interrupts it interrupts culture in a very big way.
Well, so hang on a second. I think that war actually inspires culture, both pre and post-war, is when people are radicalizing. Now let's go back to World War II, because I don't know if you were going to touch on like pre-World War II and then Weimar Berlin, which is where, look, a lot of performance art started. If we're going to talk about like Anita Berber shooting up on stage, wearing fur coats, nothing underneath, a monkey. The mark was so, $1 million marks to $1. Prostitution, everybody had to be a prostitute.
Right.
Both, there were nightclubs that were like for 1,000 people with waterfalls, those who could afford it, all outside foreigners. There were boot boys and girls, prostitutes who, by the color or the style of their boot, it was a denotation of what form of prostitution. I mean, look, sex and outlandish sex, again, we were talking earlier about back to Greek, back to the Minoan. It's always been in the picture. Just as Americans, we like to pretend for most of the time that other than selling everything with sex, it wasn't fucking happening.
Right.
But violence is allowed, sex is taboo. Now, what were you going to refer to about World War II, Fayette? You had something in your mind.
Well, the artists prior to World War II in the early part of the 20th century were really doing very much the same. And we were inspired by them. We were looking at them. We were looking at the artists from Weimar and, from Paris, from the cabarets, all those people. And you have to realize they were on the same drugs too.
Oh,
and
cool.
So a lot of the
as well as opium and morphine,
all of it.
Wishful thinking.
Right.
We're going to your inspiration, which went from like pre-Second World War, Weimar Berlin, outrageous performance artist, and lesbianism, and costumes or nudity, and shooting drugs up on stage. Anita Berber, thank you very much. And both of those books, Voluptuous Panic and The Wild Girls of Weimar Berlin, 2 mandatory reading for anybody who wants to know what sex was like back in the bad old days. So you're taking from that, you're taking from Living Theater, you're taking from Jack Smith, and here is a collective of acid-freaking undefinables dressing in regal costumes, parading down the streets of San Francisco, and then being imported, 47 of you, according to what I read, in drag to New York City to do a performance, which Danny Fields was somehow part of.
Danny Fields was our press agent.
Amazing.
And I met Danny Fields. I mean, we took over the back end of a 747. So it was a Cockette party on the plane.
I mean, 47 drag superstars, drag artists.
I mean, there was a coterie, there was the group, and then there was other people too. There was Bud Lee and Maureen Orth and, photographers and journalists and people's boyfriends and whatever, even the dog would go. So
what? Even the dog would go. All right.
Yes, it was a lot, but the actual performers were probably about 28, something.
All right.
Like
So from what I've read, I'm not sure, but the first performance in New York, although there were so many people there, might have been panned, but that did not prevent audiences from coming out in mass. And this is like, again, 1970, New York, off Broadway.
71. Well, Yeah, I mean, Danny Fields, he spent the entire first week that we were there on the phone, and he orchestrated this opening night where 3,000 people came to this funky fucking theater on Second Avenue, this falling down Anderson Theater. And that night, as far as it was record breaking in attendance. However, everybody goes on about why it crashed and why they hated it. Well, number one, the Cockettes themselves didn't care about what the critics said.
Or rehearse, from what I've heard. No rehearsing, no caring.
Yeah. But my feeling was, because there was a divergence within the group, and it was, to me, experimental theater. So it was anti-theater. It was we were anti-everything. And that was Hibiscus's state of mind. And so there were original core members that kept to that. But then the latter day Cockettes that came in wanted to be perfect creatures on the theater and had a different intent, so to speak.
Did you mention Bud Lee?
Bud Lee was a photographer that came at, I thought he and Maureen North came together, but he was a Time Life photographer.
And by the way, our friend Chris Campion, who's been on this podcast,
yes, I know Chris Campion really well.
Putting out a book on Bud Lee.
Fabulous person, yeah.
Bud Lee photographed the riots of 67, Newark. Yeah. Okay, carry on. What was Bud Lee's? Why did you mention him?
He
was
came
there
to photograph it, and I have a lot of his photos in the book because he came into the house, and I was a photographer too. So this is before we went to New York, and I said to Scrumbly, I'm going to do a photo shoot on this day. So I'm going to tell everyone we're going to do a photo shoot on this day. So then Bud Lee calls up the house, and Scrumbly answers the phone, and Bud Lee wanted to do a photo shoot. So he said, oh, well, Fayette's doing a photo shoot on blah, blah day. So why don't you come too? And I got furious at him because this was my photo shoot.
But however,
Scrumbly was, oh, Fayette, it'll be okay. I mean, one of the reasons we stayed together for 3 years in that kind of melee of San Francisco where things changed in a moment, everything would change, was because of Scrumbly, because he was like the moderator,
Right, so practical ideas, yeah.
Like I got like a little tiffy there.
The point is this, documentation is so important.
Yeah.
And we've managed to do that because we didn't know then that it would, but we knew we had to document. We knew it had to be documented.
Yeah, it was high art to me. I mean, I had been through a 4-year, very intense art school that art theory, art history, design theory. It was very modern and all the Bauhaus. And I mean, I had everything going on up here. And when I took acid, all of that, I saw, I could see what it really meant.
And you could see what it needed, which was documentation. And here we are with this glorious book.
But it was also what was happening at the time was better than anything I had ever studied. So my camera was with me all the time because I had to take pictures of it. So, but meanwhile, Bud Lee came and photographed a lot in the house, which was really great. And he continued photographing the airplane trip and everything else. I mean, he loved the Cockettes. And
in retrospect, what a gift.
Right.
That he did that. In spite of your irritation, he still did it. And that's amazing.
Well, I was irritated because I'm only in a few of the pictures.
And by the way,
you were there. I get it.
But excuse me, you're only in the few of the pictures, but who looks the best now?
Nice. Yes.
I'm going to vote for you, honey.
Nice.
All right. Let's propel this a little bit. So, all right. You come to New York, you do your show, you go back to SF, and then you hook up with Tomata du Plenty. I mean, who was, by the way, Tomata du Plenty, eventually the Screamers, which were one of the first kind of synth industrial, very strange bands from LA. But you moved to New York with Tomata du Plenty.
Now, okay. So Tomata had been in very early Cockette shows. So he was initiated into the Cockette cosmos from, he was from South LA. So he went to San Francisco like everybody else did, and he was immediately in the Cockettes because he was a highly intellectual, imaginative artist. And he did, I think, 2 shows. But, the early shows, masses of people would jump on stage or be in the show, and then they'd be gone. I didn't even meet him at the time, and he was David Harrigan. That's how Scrumbly remembers him, as David Harrigan. Then he went to Seattle and created Ze Whiz Kidz, which was like a spin-off. It was the same, yet different in the way they performed.
Well, and also a lot of people don't know, especially on the East Coast, the Screamers were a very important landmark kind of in music, because they weren't punk, but it was at the same time. They were synth based, kind of industrial, and highly weird and very arty. And they did play in New York, and I did see them. I did meet them a few times. But okay, so Tomata just shows up, does this, but then you decide to move with him to New York.
Okay, so wait a minute. So the Whiz Kidz as a group. So there were groups all over the country that were of like mind. There were very few, actually. There was the John Waters family in Baltimore. There was the Ridiculous Theater family in New York. And there were the Whiz Kidz in Seattle. So people would go as a group to visit. And it would be as if, the royalty in our sphere was coming to visit.
And this is the early 70s.
This is the summer of 1971, just before we went to New York. So they came and they performed with us in one of the Pearls Over Shanghai shows. And they had a videographer, Randy, who became Black Randy in the Metro Squad.
Okay, yeah. Unbelievable for that period.
Yes.
Very, very
he was the first.
And Black Randy.
He had the camera. Right. No, he was the first one. They did that very early on. So they came to show the videos and to be in shows and just to be with us. And so that's how I met Tomata. And we fell in love in a big way. And he wanted me to go to Seattle and perform with them, but we were on our way to New York. So the whole time we were writing back and forth. I was calling him from New York and telling him about everything. So when we got back to San Francisco, we only did a couple of more shows, and then we were done. And so I immediately packed my trunk, my Cockettes trunk, and hot-footed it to Seattle. And so then I was performing with him. But all, the underground artists, really, that was our audience in New York. The mainstream, they didn't get it, so they didn't come back, and who cared? But all the artists in New York really showed up. So the way we did the shows, the way our sets were very influential as far as underground theater was concerned. So a lot of those artists wanted us to come back and perform in New York. So Tomata and I talked about it, and we decided to go because
you gotta go. You gotta go to New York. So all right, you're going to New York. Where do you get a place to live? Where are you living?
We lived on 2nd Street and Bowery in a city-owned building. We lived on the top floor, and we got 2 apartments, which were, they faced 2nd Street. And
$75 a month?
$50 a month.
Exactly. $50 a month.
We got 2 apartments on the top floor, and we broke through the wall, and there was just a big hole in the wall. We didn't really ever finish it off.
How did you even make $50 a month then those days? How were you making $50 a month?
Tomata and I had a shop.
There you go. Selling clothes?
Everything. We sold everything. We were walking around, there was no Soho. Nobody called it Soho.
No, that was a dead zone.
Nothing like that was going on. So we were walking, Houston. We were on
finding junk, finding shit
on Mott Street. Right. We were on Mott Street. We got there in the fall, and when we got there, the way station for our people in transferring to New York was this big loft on J Street, owned or rented by one of the Stephen Buteau, who was part of the Baltimore family, the John Waters family. So Tomata and I stayed there while we were looking for a place to live. And, we found that apartment. So we're walking down the street, and it was Little Italy, right? We're on Mott Street, And this was around Christmas time when we had first got there. And we were looking for a present for John Flowers, who had followed us there. And we saw something in the window of this little shop, and it said, if you see something, go see Mario on the corner. And so we went to see the guy, and he goes, you want something in the shop? And we said, yeah. And he goes, you want the shop?
Ah! And you got the shop.
Yeah, the purveyors of this shop on Mott Street.
But that's what what people don't understand is the economy of New York at that time, which was almost bankrupt. Apartments were $50. My first apartment was $75.76. I mean, you could afford to live. You could afford to do what you do.
Live the way we wanted to live.
Exactly.
We could afford to live and be artists and be free, you know.
Exactly.
We were willing to live on the Bowery, you know.
Is the female freedom and independence, and of course, second wave feminism, the big victory was sexual freedom, quote unquote, whether that's abortion or being allowed to fucking just walk alone by yourself at night. Obviously, the two of you have dealt with a lot of male sexual aggression. Yeah. You're not very upset about it. It seems like you've
Look, I just want to
managed it pretty well.
You know what? By the time I got to San Francisco, I had already lived on my own in New York.
Right.
And I had lived, you know, pretty much on my own in Boston for 4 years, going to school. We had an apartment, my roommate and I, you know, and I grew up in New Jersey in Asbury Park. So I mean, you know, I had street savvy.
As Camille Paglia says, working class women bred on the streets know how to handle themselves. Yeah. So when but it's a good point he's making, because like male aggression, you know what? They feared me. They still fucking do. Because you know what? They might be aggressive. Really? Excuse me. Do you know how male I am and how fucking aggressive I am? And yeah, you overcome that after childhood. Yeah. Give me a fucking break. But that's our generation. Because hang on. It's our generation because we owned and claimed what we were. And you know what?
I was raised to be an independent woman.
We're not. We didn't have fear.
Right.
Awesome.
I was.
Wait, hang on. Yeah, excuse me. Right. Fayette, fear of what? Something that big? I fear it's too small.
Yeah, no, I had no fear either.
My fear is rinky dink, motherfucker. Can you bring something to the table? You want to borrow my Louisville Slugger Mini? Because I might just use it on you first. Hello.
What went wrong with the younger generation of females that they're
hang on. We don't give a shit about the younger generation. We're just finishing this conversation. Because we are not the younger generation. We're actually, you know what? Whatever their problem is, we're not dealing with it right now. I just want to go through. I want to go through the rest of this. Tomata du Plenty, back in New York, from New York to LA. You, like I, have been a nomad. You have traversed where you needed to go. You're in LA. Cockettes were a very short period, but it informed a lot of what you then went on to do. What are you doing now, sister, besides signing books? Which, by the way, this book is important, and you should be signing it, and they should be fucking mailing it. Because it is a history of a movement that was based on radical outrageousness, sexual liberation, non-gender, no bias, experimentation, high fashion. And the thing is, so many museums since are understanding what wearable art was, because basically it was a wearable art, psychedelic, acid freak out, sexually liberated, do not care what your gender is. We're all dressing like kings and queens. And the pageantry of liberation. It was about the pageantry of liberation.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And I was very concerned about presenting the aesthetic of the Cockettes. And so I was the art director in the book too. So I did the cover. I did everything in that book. And I had all these events lined up. I was
pre-COVID. You had all the events pre-COVID lined up.
Yes, pre-COVID.
Frustrating.
So I had about 8 or 10 events lined up through July already when the COVID hit, and 2 exhibitions. We were 2 days away from mounting an exhibition here in LA, and we had to shut it down.
Well, you know what? Amen for Zoom. I'm very happy we're doing this. And you know what? The book is going out and we're here to promote it because it is an important part of American counterculture history. Right. And I am so glad that you took the time to talk to us.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm an admirer of yours, and
because you know I'm in drag every day of my day. You know I'm in drag every day of my life, honey.
Absolutely, as we all should be. Yes.
Don't let the tits fool you. That's why I say it every time.